Dating back to the days before Ghenghis Khan, Mongolian wrestling has a 7,000-year history. In an age of rapid modernisation, this ancient form of fighting remains a celebrated tradition.
There isn't any weight class, no fighting ring or weight division, and there are times when a small wrestler is paired up with a much bigger one, so you need mental strength.
The country is establishing its wrestling dominance from the steppes to the sumo stadiums of Japan.
Since I left sumo, other Mongolians have also become grand champions. It's because of traditional wrestling. Across this vast land, we ride horses and fight from childhood. There's a saying when a boy is born, he's a wrestler.
As Mongolian fighters punch above their weight overseas, it's leading to a reinvention of the sport at home.
Mongolian males are very talented. They win gold medals. But female wrestlers don't just rejoice in their glory. It gives us hope to emulate their results.
I'm AMBROSE. On this edition of 101 East, we wrestle with the might of Mongolia.
I've waited for this moment for a year and I'm anxious because I have to use moves I've been practicing since last year's competition. I'm not scared. For a Mongolian to be scared, it's not a good thing, so I'm not scared.
For Tamir Batman, today is his chance at glory. The junior wrestler is competing at the Nadaam Festival, Mongolia's biggest event of the year. Wrestling is more than a sport here. For a 15-year-old like Tamir, it's a chance to prove his manhood.
I've become much stronger, and I've learnt some moves like leg sweeps, particularly two-leg sweeps.
Mongolian wrestling competitions are knockout events, where matches have no time limit. Tamir must win by throwing his opponent down, so their knees, elbow or back touch the ground. In mere minutes, Tamir is victorious. He performs a traditional eagle's dance around the winner's flagpole.
Participating in Nadaam gives pride to my family's name. Any boy jumps at the chance to wrestle at the Nadaam Festival.
More than 800 years ago, the country's revered founder, Ghenghis Khan, started the Nadaam Festival to keep his warrior army trained. Held every July, it also marks Mongolia's independence from China in 1921. During the three-day event, Mongolians proved their strength and fighter spirit through archery and some of the longest horse races in the world.
The three male sports stem from daily traditions here. Archery is linked with hunting, horse racing with herding, and wrestling is about being a warrior. My desire to be a soldier is why I chose wrestling.
Known as Bokh in Mongolia, traditional wrestling is like a no-holds-barred street fight with few restrictions. As they win more rounds, fighters are awarded the rankings of falcons, then elephants, and for the champion, a lion. The top-ranked fighters can choose their opponents. In 2 days, it takes over 500 wrestlers and matches to decide a grand champion. And you don't just need strength to win, you also need endurance, because some of these matches can last as long as 4 hours. Given the nature of the competition, The last man you'd want to face would be a gargantuan like GANBAATAR. He came runner-up at Nadaam one year and is considered one of the more formidable, experienced competitors. What have you done to outwit, to outsmart your opponents?
I've wrestled with opponents big and small. The little fighters are faster, but my strength is power. I train myself to read their moves. I'm good at grappling. With the right grabs, you can nail a big or small opponent.
GANBAATAR spends the weeks leading up to Nadaam training on the grassy steppes with other wrestlers from his province. They're secretive and superstitious, so we weren't allowed to film them training. But he tells me how wrestlers approach their opponent.
You're always on full guard. There's hand techniques, leg sweeps, and trick moves. Because Nadaam is the only time a wrestler can improve his strength, you hide that ace move until more formidable opponents.
Mongolia's capital, Ulaanbaatar, sprawls across the steppes in a modern age fueled by mining money. There's new developments and designer shops. But this nomadic nation of 3 million people still value traditions like wrestling. I can see how much when wrestling expert NYAMDORJI shows me around a new wrestling stadium, funded largely from public donations.
Even with rapid modernization and urbanization, wrestling is a sacred tradition because there's not just Nadaam wrestling in the capital. 40,000 wrestlers compete across the country during Nadaam in provinces and over 300 small towns. That's why it's strong.
The two-piece traditional garment worn by fighters has remained the same for centuries, just like the country's reverence for famous fighters. Nyamdor says the 37 distinct wrestling moves also haven't changed, even though Mongolians train today in other martial arts like judo.
Other combat sports improve a traditional wrestler's training regime, preparation and endurance, but the moves haven't changed. But Mongolian wrestling has revolutionized combat sports like sumo.
Mongolian wrestlers have not only revolutionized sumo, they dominate the ancient Japanese sport. Born into one of Mongolia's famous fighting families, ASASHORYU was one of sumo's greatest ever grand champions. The top-ranked yokozuna in Japan for 3 years. In 2005, ASASHORYU won all 6 tournaments in a calendar year, an unprecedented feat in sumo.
Mongolians are successful at sumo because of our traditional wrestling. Our traditional boots strengthen our feet. We have a hunger for accomplishment, for reaching the highest peak, and we wrestle with all our hearts to achieve our dreams.
With these dreams, Mongolians are daring to take on a 2,000-year-old tradition. Shinto shrines across Japan chronicle the history of a sport where large fighters try to push each other to the ground or out of a straw ring. Over the past 2 decades, foreigners have fought their way to the top of Japan's oldest sport. 3 of the top 4 ranked sumo wrestlers in the world are Mongolian, including the 2 current grand champions, Hakuho and Harumafuji. We're in Japan to find out what's behind the Mongolian dominance of sumo. "25-year-old SEIROU TAKESHI from Ulaanbaatar is a star on the rise, a second-tier fighter ranked in sumo's top 70. His father was a well-known wrestler in Mongolia, and this Japanese sumo stable scouted him on ASASHORYU's recommendation.
ASASHORYU was so strong and I admire him. I knew him as a child. He was like a big brother. When he became Grand Champ, I wanted to try sumo. He's given me advice. When in the ring, you've got to see an enemy in your friend. You have got to smash them. With kindness, you can't do sumo.
Today, the sumo stable is preparing in Nagoya for an upcoming tournament. SEIROU is doing light training because of a leg injury. He says sumo in many ways is tougher than Mongolian traditional wrestling.
It hurts going head to head. In the beginning, I used to avoid it. But then you get injured, and that's scary, whereas head to head only hurts for a second. You don't feel the pain when you're fired up.
SEIROU was only 17 when he came to Japan and says the past 8 years have been a hard learning curve. The biggest challenge, increasing his weight to 128 kilograms.
At the very beginning, I wanted to go home every day. Training was hard. I struggled to get fat and had to eat rice cakes every morning. You bow at everyone. I couldn't get used to that in the beginning, or saying thank you when you came out of the bath. It felt tedious, but now I'm used to it. I'm almost Japanese.
The stable master said SEIROU underestimated some of the rigours of sumo training.
He was quite aggressive, saying he'd go up the ranks in 2 years, but he gradually learnt he had to work harder. But he has a fighting instinct. I noticed that as soon as we began training. It is not exactly a good thing, but he gets frustrated when he loses and says, "One more time, one more time."
Recruiting SEIROU is a big gamble because the Japanese Sumo Association limits each stable to just one foreign wrestler. It's to protect their fighting heritage. Japan hasn't had a grand champion since 2006.
If there are 5 or more foreign fighters in a stable, they could form their own clique or group. So I think the rule is good, because a stable can't function without being a family. I raise them together. I don't see them at all as foreigners or not. The outsiders may see it as foreigners increasing, foreigners getting stronger, but in my view, it's about raising one apprentice.
Exciting.
Yeah. Japanese sports writer KOICHI AIZAWA is showing me around Tokyo's Sumo Museum. Pictures of champion foreign fighters stand out from the ancient sumo artefacts of yesteryear. He believes for the sport to survive, the tough rules against foreign wrestlers need to be relaxed.
I think the door should be opened up and the regulation loosened gradually. 1 person, 2, and then 3 fighters.
The one foreigner per stable rule, is that holding the game back?
I think there is that tendency, but the Sumo Association wants to see a strong Japanese grand champion. They are clinging on to that hope now.
But foreign sumo wrestlers can create epic clashes, like this bout between Mongolian Grand Champion Hakuho in black and Japan's new hope Kisen Sato in red. The Mongolian wins despite a parochial crowd spurring their hometown hero on. Mr. Aizawa says this level of competition should be encouraged.
They cannot maintain the level of sumo unless they introduce more foreign wrestlers, because they are setting the high standard. Mongolians in particular have their style. Normally in Japanese sumo, you keep your hips low and push. Mongolian wrestlers do that, but with their traditional style, can throw their opponents out of the ring.
But times are changing in Japanese society. Children are choosing sports like soccer and baseball over sumo. The intense rigours of training, poor wages, and recent controversies have tarnished the sport's reputation.
It's true people drifted away from sumo after many scandals. Wrestlers using marijuana, one wrestler died from hazing rituals in a stable, and there was illegal gambling. Rigging bouts was discovered in 2011. The existence of match fixing has been whispered for a long time, but it was finally made public. So many people felt they could not trust sumo anymore.
When he was grand champion, ASASHORYU was embroiled in several scandals that brought the sport into disrepute and stirred up anger towards foreign fighters. He was the first yokozuna in history to be disqualified for misconduct after yanking an opponent's hair knot. His bad boy antics jarred with the sport's strict codes, and after a drunken bar fight at a Tokyo nightclub, he was forced to retire in 2010.
ASASHORYU was popular but mischievous and caused all sorts of problems. Sports fans wondered what is wrong with his grand champion. They expected to be impeccable and clean, but ASASHORYU wasn't someone you could respect.
Because of these cultural differences, there were misinterpretations and misunderstandings. Because of my Mongolian spirit, it's okay to celebrate. But they wanted to subdue my celebratory ways. It's hard for anyone to constrain where they come from. There might have been problems because I'm foreign, but I don't contemplate them. I wrestled well. Japan has different traditions. Mongolia is a vast land. Japan doesn't have gers, doesn't have horses. So there's a real difference, different cultures.
Out on the steppes, the popularity of sumo has waned locally since ASASHORYU's controversial departure. GANBOLD, another high-ranking former sumo, was also forced into retirement for match fixing in 2011. When in Japan, GANBOLD claims he never got the chance to defend himself, and the Sumo Association is too strict.
It was very stressful. You always had to accomplish something. You were in a very competitive environment. Coming back, I feel more relaxed and laid back. One relaxing part is no one is force feeding me now. I ate a lot of food to gain weight. I would lie on the ground. They would feed me, and when I stood up, I would basically throw up.
GANBOLD is trying to get back into traditional wrestling, training with a team that has produced the last 3 Nadaam winners. But he says it's not easy for sumos to get back into fighting shape for Mongolian wrestling.
I had a reputation for being bulky during my sumo days. But when I retired and returned to traditional wrestling, I had to forget all the signals I learned in sumo. I've been wrestling for 2 years, and I'm still only 60% on the way to physical recovery.
It's why today many Mongolians are inspired by a different type of fighter. TUVSHINBAYAR Nadaam was born in a remote ger to nomadic herders. He became Mongolia's first ever gold medalist in judo at the Beijing Olympics. As the nation gets richer, he says fewer Mongolians see sumo as a path out of poverty.
When people went into sumo, it was a time when the economy wasn't so good. Now, because of our good economy, people will opt for Olympic sports and traditional wrestling instead of sumo. These days, I'd advise my path as an Olympian is better and more lucrative.
TUVSHINBAYAR believes athletes like himself who choose Olympic combat sports also have the fitness to compete at Nadaam.
People tell me I'm an Olympic champion, one of the best in the world. Why participate in Nadaam? It's a small competition. My response is, I want to go and give it respect.
You were considered quite junior when it comes to Mongolian wrestling here. So what are you going to do to try and elevate your ranking at Nadaam?
Every sportsman starts from the lower ranks, and all of them to achieve great things and win. I'm going to enter Nadaam with the spirit that I'm going to win and succeed.
With that spirit, TUVSHINBAYAR went all the way to the quarterfinals at Nadaam this year, until he was outmaneuvered by a bigger opponent. He believes promoting the sport is just as important as winning.
The time has come for Mongolian wrestling to be better known. The management of the sport is poor, and we need to promote it to the youth more.
ASASHORYU agrees and has taken over the reins of Olympic freestyle wrestling in Mongolia. As one of the country's richest people, he is hoping to create a bigger domestic wrestling league like NBA American basketball, a sumo-sized task in this sparsely populated nation.
We have in the making a business plan to improve the management and standard of Olympic wrestling. It needs funding, and I'm helping with that. We're also looking at improving team skills, young wrestlers, and increasing the number of local competitions.
There's also a push to encourage other new competitors to the mat. Women. For centuries, Mongolia offered few athletic opportunities for them. Now women are winning medals in judo and wrestling at big regional tournaments.
Mongolian men have the option of traditional wrestling. We don't. But women who are skilled in combat sports have the option of Greco-Roman wrestling.
SHOOVDOR BAATARJAB is part of the Blue Timberwolves, a women's wrestling club in Ulaanbaatar. A former volleyball player, she switched to wrestling a year ago. Inspired by the achievements of other female fighters, she dreams of competing at the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro.
Volleyball and other team sports in Mongolia haven't really been developed. Wrestling is a pure battle, a test of strength, and that's why I like it. Whereas volleyball is just a game.
SHOOVDOR says the sport has given her and other women more willpower and physical endurance. She would like to learn some techniques from traditional wrestling to improve her own skills, but wouldn't dream of competing.
Since I was a child, I grew up in the countryside. I saw girls do archery and ride horses, but I never saw girls do wrestling or wear the gown. I believe it shouldn't happen because it would shame the men's pride.
At Nadaam, women can compete in archery and horse racing. But wrestling remains a long shot. Male wrestlers wear an open-chested uniform because in the 1800s, legend has it, a princess beat the men to win the wrestling title, causing much embarrassment. While wrestling remains staunchly traditional in modernising Mongolia, the warrior spirit lives on in young boys like Tamir Batmand. He sees wrestling as a lifelong pursuit, a chance to take on the world.
My wrestling older peers go to other countries to wrestle, and I also want to go too. I'm too young now, but ultimately I want to participate in global competitions for a lot of championships. I want to wrestle until the day I die.
Mongolian wrestling is more than moves and throws. It's the fierce competitiveness that has seen this country dominate the sumo halls and kept the ancient fighting tradition alive for centuries. Whether wrestlers fly or fall to the ground, the spirit of the sport brings pride to a nation of warriors.